Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be creating the February flower, and one of them is the iris. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I wanted to kind of show you my progression basically. So I usually will sketch it out first, and then I will outline it so that I can use my light table, and then I always practice it. There are so many colors of irises, which I'll show you in part 2. And then I transfer it to my watercolor paper. So today I'm going to show you how to draw it, and then in the next video we're going to paint them. So I'm going to put this off to the side. I will keep my drawing up on the screen. That way you can see what I'm drawing at the same time. So they're kind of an oddly shaped. They're very, very weird, but I think they're so pretty that I thought, why not? There's like this shape, this shape. There's some petals that will go up, and then there's some that hang off the side. So, and there's some that are crinkly, some that are kind of smooth. So it's just an odd flower. So there's not, I feel like it lends itself to not feeling like it has to be perfect. So I'm going to kind of start with what I believe is one of the easiest ways to do it, is you can kind of make a triangle to start with a more of a rounded bottom, kind of like a candy corn. And then you can kind of pick your center, and then you can start with this bottom leaf, which has a little wave there. And then you can also, instead of drawing all the little swirlies, you can just kind of pencil it in first. That way you can kind of get the placement. And then you can do the top one, which kind of starts in the center and then flares out a little bit. And you can do the same thing. And then again, we'll be able to make adjustments, but this is just a good way to just kind of get the sketch in. And then we can do this petal here. And it goes right almost up to this top petal. And then it will connect a little bit past the middle of this petal. And then the same on the other side. And they're kind of flaring out a little bit. Like so. And then these, you only see like half of the petal. And they go up a little farther there. And then the other one's almost the same. And then that's the shape. So then we can go in and start really kind of shoring it up, where it's skinnier up here at the top, and then it's gonna bow out a little bit and then come to a point. And I have never drawn this exactly the same way twice. I just put some little swirlies in, or little bumps. And this is when you really decide, oh, hey, I don't like that line. Hey, I want to move that. Kind of skinny here, and then it goes out to get a little fatter, and then it comes to a point. And then for this one, comes to a point, but you're seeing the outside and some of the inside. So this is where you're kind of creating the inside, and then you would come in and kind of finish it off on the outside. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. You just don't see as much of it. It's skinnier at the top, and then gets fatter, and then comes in and meets this petal here. And then in the center, there's these circles, or half circles. Those are like the little center pods or seeds. And then you can have your stem leaning if you want. I just kind of had mine go straight down. And then I just kind of put in a swirly leaf. And this one I had where you could see the outside part of it as well. So this would be the inside, this would be the outside. Hopefully that makes sense. So then I would shore this up with a fine liner. I'm going to use a Posca pen so you can see it a little bit better, just so I can really see what lines I want and continue to make any little adjustments. And then you can erase your pencil lines, so when you go to transfer it to your watercolor paper, you won't have a bunch of extra lines and then not know which to draw on your watercolor paper. You can also use transfer paper. You just have to be careful with that because you can't erase any of the lines when you do that. The transfer paper, it's permanent, so keep that in mind. So that's the drawing, and I will be back to paint it in. Welcome back. So now we're going to begin painting our irises. I decided just to keep this in one video since the drawing portion wasn't very long. I am using my little watercolor pad, 100% cotton, cold pressed sheet. I've already got it transferred to that paper, make it nice and easy. There are so many different colors of irises that you could really even make up colors if you wanted, but I'm gonna do like a purpley and violet-y color. So this is what I practiced this just to see if I like the color, so I think this is the one I'm gonna do. I also did a blue and yellow, so this is what I'm gonna go with today though. I have, as always, my Princeton brushes. I have my 3, my 6, my 3, my 6, and my 10. And then I also have my number 1 Polina Bright. And then for the paints, they're Komoreli. It's a Japanese watercolor. They're very highly pigmented. This is the packaging. And this is violet. This is Hyacinth violet. And then this is a color, it's Cerise. It's Cerise, so I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. And then I have a little bit of cadmium yellow right here. And then my greens are the brilliant green and peak green. And I'm keeping this super simple. We're just gonna use the colors directly from the pan. We're not gonna do any color mixing, just keep it nice and easy. And then I wanted to show you, I have so many supplies, I forget what I own. So I was like, what can I do around the edges instead of the washi tape, which I actually do really like. But I found these little distressed inks, which are really neat because you can take it, and that's what I did kind of around the border here. You can just kind of wipe it along, and then it creates a really cool like border effect. So I thought I would do that today. I'm going to be painting each petal one at a time using the wet on wet method. That way I can have the colors diffuse naturally together, which I think is really beautiful. So I'm going to be starting with just clean water. And remember, where you put the water is going to be a map for where the paint is going to go. So if you want to stay within the confines of the petal, make sure that you keep the water inside of that. And you want there to be a sheen on the paper, but you don't want big puddles of water. So I'll kind of look at it in the light a little bit just to see if I missed maybe a little spot or anything of the water. And then I'm going to go in first with the center color, which will be the dark color. So depending on what colors you're choosing, if you were, doing the blue, then you would start with the yellow on the inside. If you were doing yellow and yellow, just the darker yellow and then a lighter yellow on the way out towards the edge of the petals. And then there's even like white where you would just kind of do the purple towards the edge. So that's, and again, there's so many different varieties. I think you could just do whatever you want. So I'm going to go straight in first with the violet color, the darker of the colors. Loading up my brush. And there's a little bit too much water still on that paper right there, so I'm going to soak some of that up. And now I'm going to go back in with that. It's a very creamy consistency. And I'm going to leave it just like that. And then I'm going to go in with my Princeton number 10. And I'm going to load my brush up with that Hyacinth violet. And I'm going to start on the opposite end and start pulling the paint towards that violet that I already put down. And I just picked up a little bit of a smaller brush so I can get really close to those edges. And again, there's a little bit too much water, so I'm just soaking some of that up with the brush and then wiping it off on my paper towel here off to the side.
Come with me. It's meant to.
And then I'm going to just kind of flick my brush a little bit to have those kind of meld together, but that's all I'm doing. I'm not going to disturb the paint anymore. I am going to use the tip of my brush just a little bit right here because again there was a little bit too much water. And then I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm going to pick it up a little bit of clean water and I'm actually going to drip some in there. It's going to do like a really cool effect. And then I'm going to move on to the next petal. I'm going to skip around a little bit so that I can try to let each petal dry before I put the paint on the next one so they don't run together, which is why I'm doing it separately. Also just to have a little bit more control. So I've got my brush, mostly clean water. There's a little bit of a tint to it just because of the highly pigmented violet color, but that's okay since it's all going to get painted anyway. And now I'm going to go in with that darker purple again, just up here towards the center. I'm just lightly touching the tip of my brush to the paper, and then I'm letting the water carry it. And then I'm going to switch to the other color, the Hyacinth violet. And again, starting at the opposite end, I'm just kind of going around the edge and then letting that paint kind of fill in. And I'm taking, it's not a very wet brush at all. Just, I'm gonna kind of flick a little bit those together to fill in that white a little bit. If I see any pooling, I go ahead and kind of squeegee that up with my brush. Now I'm gonna go ahead and dry these two and then I'll actually zoom in a little bit. That way when we go on to the next ones, they won't bleed into each other. So I'll be right back. Okay, so then I'm gonna start up here with this one. And it's folded over, so the inside will be darker than the outer edge here, and then kind of the outer edge here. So I'm going to use a smaller brush this time because I'm going to start with just this little tiny area. And just put a little water in there, and then I'm going to go in with that Hyacinth purple. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm not going right up against that little part that I just painted in. I could have done that second, but that's okay. Once I get down here, I'm bringing that water right up against that other leaf. Just being mindful that I don't put too much water into that color or it'll make it bleed. Even though it's dry, if you re-wet it, it'll move on you. And this time I'm actually going to go in with the lighter color first. Just following along the very edge of the petal. And then I'm going to go in with the violet, and I'm following along the other side, right along that front leaf. And then I'm going to go in with this other color, the one I can't pronounce. It's a little bit redder, but I'm just bringing in a little bit of it on the edge here, just to deepen that in a little bit, just for contrast. But that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to mush those down. Mush. I'm not going to let those diffuse anymore. I like having that little bit of white in there.
Be everything you can be. We can be free. As free as we want to be. 'Cause nothing can stop us. Only if we do. Can we just stay forever? We can be free. Be everything you can be.
And my brush is barely damp. And I'm actually just going to run the tip of it just right along that edge there, pulling towards the outer edge so that just that little bit of color can reach the edge there, because I kind of like that being lighter right there on the edge. And then this side would be the inside, so this part down here would be the most purple, and then you would see a little bit of that lighter color. So again, this area here, I'm going to go not quite touching it, So I don't want to disturb it too much. I'm going to pick up some of that darker purple and go right along that edge, or really close to it. Rinse my brush and then pick up the Hyacinth purple. And this time I'm going along the edge of where that darker purple is. And wiping my brush off and then running along that outer edge so that it carries some of that paint over to the edge. Now my brush is just damp. I'm just picking up some of that purple that bled over into the other part. And then I will let that dry and then I can go back in and kind of clean that up. In hindsight, I could have just done it in portions and moved on. That's probably what I would do if I did it again, but that's okay. Going right next to that petal here, but not trying to disturb the paint that's already put down there. This petal's like bent, so the most of the darker purple would be kind of towards the top up here. And I'm taking a little bit of that clean water again and just kind of splattering a little bit into the petal, or a lot. The reason I kind of tap some water in there is because I like how it kind of creates some space in there to make it look like there's a little bit of white shining through. While I still had that purple on my brush, I went ahead and painted that petal up at the top. Gotta turn my paper for a second. And I'm gonna go back up to the petal where I just put that paint down. And I'm just gonna run the tip of my brush right along that edge so that it softens that line up. That's what I love about watercolor. What it kind of does all on its own. It's so beautiful. I'm gonna go ahead and fill this in right here. And then I'm taking a little bit of clean water and just sprinkling a little bit into that petal as well. And then while those are kind of doing their thing, we're gonna go ahead and paint the stem and the leaves. And this is super simple. I'm starting with the peak green. It's a fairly creamy consistency. And I'm just gonna bring that all the way down the stem. And I'm dabbing off some of the extra paint, and then I'm going into that darker color, or brilliant green, I guess. I think it's a little bit darker, so that's why I did it in this order. And then I'm just touching the tip of my brush along one side, so it be the shadow color. And then again, I can just run my brush with just clean water, barely wet, just kind of damp, along the edge to soften between the two colors. And then for the leaves, I'm basically gonna do the same thing. And I'm gonna go in with a little bit of that darker color. I'm actually gonna mix the two. And then I'm gonna bring a little bit of a darker color down along the bottom edge, because that would be more in shadow. And you can kind of just flick your brush a little bit, get some texture. And while I still have that darker color, this one's folded, so this section here would be on the inside. So I'm just gonna go ahead and go in with that darker color. And then I'm going to pick up some of that darker color again, and then near the stem, and then across kind of the bottom of the petal, I'll drop in a little bit of that darker because it would also be in shadow. And then bring a little bit more right along that edge. Now I'm going to go in and paint the little sections on the inside, the yellow color. You definitely want to have clean water when you switch to yellow. Mine's clean-ish. My paint's pretty ready to go, so it should be okay, or you'll get some weird color. And I'm just going to go straight in with a creamy consistency and just fill those little seed pods or whatever they're called. And I'm going to bring in my rigger brush just to put in a few directional lines. Kind of did that here.
Nothing in my way. Some journeys have to be made.
And then you can decide if you want to outline it. You would dry it, outline it. I also did put in a little bit of white Posca pen on this one as well. I'm not going to do that this time, but I am going to do the Beloved Splatter because there's a lot of empty space. This one I did do a shadow, but I don't know how I feel about that, so I decided not to do it again. So I'm gonna make a little bit of a more watered down consistency of the two purples and then just drop in a few little splatters. The bigger the brush, the fatter the splatters. So this was my number 10. And then I'm gonna come in with that darker purple and I'm gonna bring in a little bit of a smaller brush. And then I'm gonna dry this really quick and then I will do the edges and then I think we're gonna be done. All right, so this is all dry. I'm gonna take this yellow. Just because there's a little bit of yellow there, kind of tie them together. And I'm just kind of wiping it along the edge, maybe a little bit more in the corners. On this, I'm just going to kind of tilt it since it's connected at the top. And I'm feeling like I want to actually bring in a little bit of white splatter. So this is a little bit of bleed-proof white. I'm just going to kind of focus just around the flower a little bit. There we go. I just thought it needed a little extra pizzazz. So there is our February flower of the month, the iris, and happy birthday to all the February birthdays. Thank you so much for being here. And again, I post every Wednesday. You can follow me on Bluesky and share your work with me there. I'd love to see what you're working on. I will have all the links in the description box. And I will see you next week. Have a great week. Bye.